everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ReelQuick. And as promised, we are going to be reviewing Aftersun because as of right now, and I know there's a lot of movies left in award season and towards the end of the year that have some high praise, so they could make our way in our top fives, top ones. But right now, Aftersun is in all of our top five unanimously. I believe it's Cam and Seth's number 2 film of the year as of right now, and it's George and I's number 1. So we promised on the podcast we were going to give a full review of it because we just ran out of time on the podcast. We wanted to give it its due diligence. So as always with our reviews, we're going to keep it non-spoiler in the first half, and then we're going to go spoiler talk in the second half. But of course, like we all can agree, this is a movie that I would say is like best going in blind. We'll give some non-spoiler, very general thoughts. But if you're really excited to see Aftersun, you just can't wait to see it, and you've heard so much about it, probably just don't even need to listen to this. You can probably just like drop us a like and head out, because if you're already excited for this movie, then just go see it if you can. But quick synopsis before we jump in. 20 years after their last holiday at a fading vacation resort, Sophie reflects on the rare time spent with her loving and idealistic father, Callum. At 11 years old, as the world of adolescence creeps into Sophie's view, Callum struggles under the weight of life outside of fatherhood. Sophie's recollections become a powerful and heart-rending portrait of their relationship as she tries to reconcile the father she knew with the man she didn't. So that kind of gives you an overall theme here. Who do we want to start with here? We'll keep it very general, and I think kind of like we talked about right before we click record, the general portion that's non-spoiler will probably be pretty quick because, as Cam mentioned, talking about the overall takeaways and themes is kind of what we're all going for. So let's just go generally about it. We'll start with Cameron.
Yeah, so this movie is really incredible. It's really well written. Some of the shots are beautiful. This whole movie basically is told, or not whole movie, but a lot of this movie is told through Callum's daughter's camera. And sometimes it's like the camera that you're watching is just watching the camera, and through that or on the TV or whatever like that.
Long
so
shots,
it's got like it's got really cool like camera work in this thing. It's absolutely stunning. It's very emotional. It will hit you hard. So the one thing that I'll say, and the reason it's not number 1 for me, and this is a very me thing to say, like Everything Everywhere All at Once is my best of the year. By a point, and I would say like the smallest point is this is more of a slow burn, and I think we can all agree like if you watch the first 30 minutes of this, you will not love it. If you watch the first hour of it, you will not love it. It's not until you get to like the end where you're sitting there and you're like, well, I mean, you'll probably still love it. I'm just saying, like, you almost need to like.
I totally get where you're coming from.
I think it depends on your like preference in film.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like Everything Everywhere All at Once for me is like obviously it's an action and has a ton of emotion and all that. So I think it's just like rounds out a little bit. This is more of a slow burn. So I don't think it's
if
for
you're
everyone.
like me, like you'll probably like it a bit more.
The funny thing is, you and I both, it's our second of the year, right? But different number 1s.
Yeah, well, I've got Everything Everywhere All at Once third. I still think it's amazing.
I mean, it's like splitting hairs for me with the EE.
Yeah, no,
it's not like
it's
not like George and I are saying it's way better. Like
no, I think it's funny. I just thought it was funny. Both of our 2s, but different.
Keep going, Cam.
If you usually like realign with my taste a bit, you probably prefer this because it's a little bit more slower. But Everything Everywhere All at Once is that incredibly enjoyable, entertaining, thing. But
the last thing I was going to say is I've tried to start kind of doing this of where, would an average person walking down the street enjoy this movie? And I don't know if they would.
I would say no.
Really? Really?
It's a lot more meaning than anything. And I was also like, I was talking to my sister and my wife yesterday, and they were like, they said they don't like movies where they have to think too much. They just want to go to a movie and be entertained. Yep. So like this movie, you have to think, and it's deep, and it's a lot of like reading up on like what the meaning is. So that's just my quick opinion on the movie, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say just because I'm coming from a similar mindset where I know the exact type of movies my girlfriend likes versus what I like, and I think a very freeing thing with becoming like deeper into movies, not trying to sound like pretentious, but like when I'm at the point right now where I watch movies and I'm not expecting anything like any experience out of it because I watch so many, I just want a good story. So that's why I can see stuff like Banshees or Aftersun. That's just a story that you're not going to go to the theater and be like, that was a mind-blowing theater experience. But I go to the theater so often that's like I don't need, that big action, big budget piece thing every time. Whereas for most people, they go to the theater like twice a year. So I can totally get why it's like, I want to see a spectacle when I'm going to the theater and paying expensive prices. But for me, like I totally agree with Cam. I don't think it's for everyone. Like I had people message me on my Instagram being like, hey, this is your number one movie of the year. I just didn't really love it. Like, honestly, like I went off your recommendation. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of not really exactly for everyone. And I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here because I posted a TikTok saying things I like think are overdone in movies, and one of the things I talked about is like when people do like too artsy of shots where it's just like only in the rear view mirror and it just goes on way too long. And Breaking Bad has a ton of it where it's like filming out of like the muffler of a car, and it's just kind of like you're just kind of jacking yourself off with how cool the cinematography is. But in Aftersun, because of the overall story it's trying to tell, where I mean this is in the plot, so it's not a spoiler, it's in the plot I just read. It's someone reflecting on their childhood. So the fact that they're showing a reflection in a TV screen, they're showing the film of a film that's being shown, it's kind of showing how like they don't have their 100% memory and recollection. They're kind of seeing what the mirror reflection is, or kind of what the blurry image is of what they think their past is. So I do think all those artsy shots worked in here. But that being said, I can totally see the average Joe watching this being like, this is just way too art house for me with all this like sound of a zooming in old camera and scratchy footage. So yeah, I don't think it's a hot take at all to say it's not for everyone. So I'll leave it at that for my thoughts, where I thought it was very, very artsy. It worked for me though. I can totally see it not working for people. And like Cam said, I was on the fence. Like I don't think I disliked it as much as Cam in the first 30 minutes, first hour.
I didn't dislike it. I'm just saying I think you need the whole movie.
Totally. But yeah, I definitely was like kind of like, okay, this is like very interesting. Where are we going with this? And when it kind of all comes together, then it's like it all ties together super well. But yeah, it's my number one of the year. I'll kick it over to Seth.
Yeah, like I agree and disagree. I think when it comes to any film that is sort of art house in a way and that does, provide a bit more of thought provoking and stuff like that, you are going to get a lot of general audiences put off by that. But I think what the beautiful thing, what this film does, is it can reconcile with so many people because of the issues you may have faced in your day-to-day life, which are a common theme, such as mental health, such as fatherhood, such as building relationships, such as even scenes of friendship and stuff like this. I think that this can offer so many different audiences something different in terms of like emotional investment. I said this on Twitter. I think this is like a masterclass in a heartbreak narrative. I think it's like on the face of it, it's quite warm. The way it's shot, the kind of connection between the two, but then it's kind of subtly devastating. Obviously, we'll speak about this more in the spoilers, but you cut to a lot of shots of the dad in a club, which obviously what we know is I won't go into yet, but which are kind of like anxiety inducing in certain parts where you kind of know that something is coming, but then on the face of it, it is this kind of filled with like love, comfort, connection with this kind of undertone. But I think a lot of people will be able to maybe not relate, but understand, because it's a very human, authentic film. It's a film where these are problems that many people face, mental health, dealing with fatherhood, dealing with, kids that they don't see as often as they'd like, dealing with whether it's money issues, which are kind of related to in the film, whether it's, connection with a certain person or whatever. I think there's a lot that everyone can take from this. And I think, yes, I don't think everyone will love it because it is quite arty. I think there's a lot that people can take from this. So I think everyone should at least give it a chance in a way. But yeah, I give it a 5. I think it was second best. I also think it's important to mention, obviously, Charlotte Wells, this was her directorial debut. One of the best directorial debuts I can think of, at least in the past decade or so. And I also found this quite funny. The girl who actually played Sophie never acted before this. She isn't a trained actor or anything.
Crazy.
Her mum sent in for a casting agency, just got her the part because they were looking for a tomboy. She got the part and she did a really good job. And obviously Paul Mescal, is it Paul Mescal? Yeah, he was fantastic. He was amazing. Yeah, I give this 5 out of 5. Well, I think we all did. I loved the whole way through just because I kind of like the drawn out effect sometimes. But yeah, I think it might not be for everyone, but you should probably give it a chance anyway.
George.
Yeah, I mean, you guys touched on it all. It's one of those like theater experiences that like genuinely just broke my heart. And I've said this so many times on my TikTok. If you can like genuinely make me like shake because of how emotional you make me, I'm in love with you. The credits started rolling and I kind of just felt like so down. And then the second I stepped out of that theater, I just broke down. Literally the second I walked out of the door, I started hysterically crying, drove home in silence because I didn't want to play any music and disrespect my emotions. But yeah, this was, and we'll get into more spoilers, so I don't want to harp too much because you guys kind of touched on everything I was going to say. It's just one of the most beautifully endearing films of the last 10 years. It's 2022's 9 Days. I don't know if you guys saw Ed Sonoda's 9 Days from last year. Yeah, just another really like profound movie about just like the life experience and shit like that. So yeah, if it's 5 out of 5. I said in my Letterboxd review, I didn't think any movie would pass Everything Everywhere All at Once, just because of how much I love Everything Everywhere All at Once. But the emotions that this movie got out of me, the performance that Paul Mescal put on, should get an Oscar nomination. He's not going to, unfortunately.
I think he could.
He could.
We'll see.
Yeah, low budget A24.
It's very limited.
That's open. Yeah, that's opened in one theater within a 20-mile radius of me.
We should mention that. Like, we want you all to see this, but you might not be able to.
The theaters
are limited.
You like literally can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely adored this thing. I do agree with Tyler where it's like every so often movies can get a little too artsy fartsy, but I think every single shot selection in this film was just perfectly crafted to kind of complement the deeper themes of this film, which we'll talk about a little more in our spoiler talk in a little bit. But yeah, 5 out of 5. ReelTok collection plug. It's there. I fucking love this film. I love Paul Mescal. I don't know how someone is this talented to produce a film as high a quality as this on their first try. I also said in my TikTok review, I wish I was that good at literally anything in my life. I wish there was one thing in the world that I was that good at, because it's unbelievable. And I love this fucking movie, and I cannot wait to see it again.
Also, shout out, because this film has already got onto the top 10
narrative
female
directed by women on Letterboxd.
Yeah, crazy.
Yep. Deserved.
Awesome. Well, if that's not enough hype for you to go see this movie, I don't know what else will get you out to go to the theater to get you to drive that hour plus to go see it. But we'll start the spoiler talk now. So leave this video now, drop us a like, and head out if you don't want any spoilers. But if you've already seen it or you just want to hear us talk about spoilers, we'll get right into it. And I'm just going to kick it right back to George, since by the time you got to talk non-spoiler, we kind of sucked up all the talking points. So we'll kick it to George first for the spoiler talk.
I mean, yeah, do we have is there anything specific we want to kind of run down? Sure. We'll start here. This film is, depending on what stage of life you're in, this could be a very tough watch, or this could just be a very bland watch. It kind of depends where you are in life. This film does deal with a lot of mental health issues. Paul Mescal's character, Callum, he's going through it. You know, he's going through money problems. He's being repeatedly asked by his daughter, you know, where did you think at the age of 11 you would be at the age of 31? His daughter starts talking about, you know, themes of happiness, and Callum is just looking in the mirror and he kind of spits at himself. So this movie is going to leave you very kind of, I don't want to say dead inside, but it's going to make you feel, you know, a little depressed, because we are touching on very, very deep subjects, very deep themes here, even when Callum is being sung happy birthday. You know, there's not a smile to be found on his face. He's staring down. You know, he's in that rug shop and he's trying to figure out how he could purchase this rug for his daughter, and he just can't afford it. So, you know, plugging back, I know Cam had mentioned it, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago. If you're going through anything, reach out to us. We're always here. This movie is going to hit a lot of people very differently, just depending on what stage of life you are at. I'll tune it over to someone else. I don't know what spoilers we want to specifically start talking about.
I think one of the most powerful scenes in the film for me is the scene where he kind of walks out into the ocean and doesn't come back.
I thought that, like,
yeah. So
I thought he was
let's
dead,
be honest. Obviously, we're in spoilers now anyway. It's not said, but the interpretation from this film is that when obviously they got home, Callum killed himself. I think that's obviously what we know from it. That is the interpretation that we have. But I think that the scene where he's kind of walking out, you know, signifies that, and you understand that. But I think it's more than that. It's him kind of looking for escape of the life that he is in, where he can't find any. And I think, like the scenes with the nightclub, there's so much interpretation you can take from that, so many different meanings. Because at first I remember watching the nightclub scenes and thinking that it was like a real flashback of Callum's life or something, and thinking that maybe it was him and kind of the mother as they were breaking up when they were arguing. Obviously, you find out that's Sophie, and it's basically just, I believe, on her kind of looking at her dad's life, looking for the struggles they're going to, and kind of not understanding it. That's what she's reconciling throughout the whole film. But I think like Cam said, I think when he was kind of the scene where he's walking out into the ocean, I thought that was him committing suicide. Obviously, we find out that's not the case, and that's why also I think the best scene in this film is the last dance. The dance in the resort at the end, where they flash between the what I anticipate to be the craziness of Callum's mind, how much he's going through, to him with Potter feeling relaxed, feeling the emotion, and actually feeling love at the same time. And I think that was like the scene that probably got me the most when they start kind of dancing, they're going through it. And then also you have the end scene where he's in the airport holding the camera, walks away. Again, more signified that. I think
film also, and I just want to piggyback off your point of like when he walked into the ocean. I think everyone kind of collectively thought, okay, this is it. Like this movie, Charlie Wells does such a good job at like kind of making us feel uneasy and kind of making us think that we're building up to this massive like suicidal event. He almost gets ripped by that bus. There's one scene where he's standing on the balcony and maybe he fell or something.
Sorry, I forgot that scene. The standing on the balcony.
There's so many instances that just kind of show like, okay, like something large is going to happen, something big is going to happen. Paul Mescal's character is just going absolutely through it. There's one really good scene in this movie, and I didn't even catch it. I read, this is how you know a movie is good. I can't even tell you how many articles I read about this movie after I finished watching it. The scene where he's playing billiards pool with his daughter, and the two guys come up and they ask, how old is your sister, or what's your sister's name? He says, oh no, I'm her father. The way they treat him as a human being, as a man, completely changes. They stop cursing around him. They become significantly more respectful towards him and his daughter. And you could see him literally die inside. And this is where I think Paul Mescal is absolutely brilliant in this movie. It's his subtle facial expressions that just show so fucking much. The second he says, I'm their father, the second these boys start treating him differently because of that, you can kind of see, okay, he's 31 and his daughter's 11 years old. So he had this kid at 20 years old. That probably affected his life completely. He probably didn't have that experience in his 20s that he would have liked. He had to tune into responsibility significantly faster, which is probably, I can't relate. Obviously, I don't have a kid and I'm 25 years old, but I can't imagine that wasn't a massive toll on his mental health.
Also, I completely agree. I actually think I read that myself, actually, because there's so many little things that happen that work towards the final conclusion that you kind of, which is why I'm excited to rewatch it, because
I get what you mean.
It's one of those films, isn't it? But I think another like really powerful scene when you do see that facial expression is the the scene where she's doing the karaoke on the stage. That was
just really didn't want to do it.
Just distraught. And I think anyone who's had previous mental health problems can kind of relate to being perfectly fine one day, then going from one day to the next and just being completely out of it. And I think that was really powerful in the way that was shot. That kind of obviously definitely got to me as well. But I think like George said, there's so much you can look through with this film, like so much interpretation you can take from it. And also you can take, I think the best thing about it is there's no real conclusion to this. Everyone thinks that there is, and we all kind of think the same thing about it. But realistically, you can take from this film what you can, because there's no guaranteed conclusion to any of it, really.
It's a film that's crazily left. Is that even a word, crazily? But it's left up for interpretation like crazy. I know.
Yeah.
I had walked out of the theater and I didn't even have suicide on my mind. I just thought it was a very deep, long years of mental health struggle that kind of caused him to become estranged with his daughter. I actually texted Tyler. I was like, hey, did you think he killed himself, or do you think they just don't talk? I forgot what you said, Tyler, but I think you were on the same boat as me, where I don't think you
Interesting. Really?
Well, no, I said the most common interpretation to me is the suicide, but I didn't take that right away. I thought it could be either, because like you said, Seth, it's so open to interpretation. I was like, either he's dead or not, but what we do know for sure is he's not in her life. So 90% likely it's suicide, or it just means like he did something that was so detrimental to his family life, that like the mom was like, get out of her life, you can't be in it, something like that. My interpretation was just he's just 100% removed from her life, with suicide being the most likely outcome.
Yeah. And then this film also just, and obviously I don't pay attention to detail as much as I probably should in film, so this is credit to all the articles that I read. There's so much just like tiny attention to detail. Like one of the first opening shots of this movie is when Sophie is sleeping, and prior to that you kind of saw Caleb as, you know, this very reserved guy, and now his daughter's sleeping. He kind of feels maybe the weight of being a responsible father lift off his shoulders. He's outside, he's smoking a cigarette, he's dancing about like he literally has no worry in the world, which is a completely different way of acting while he acts, you know, when his daughter's awake and he has to put on the parental figure. And then he's also, you know, there's shots of Tai Chi books all around. You know, he does these Tai Chi moves. His daughter kind of jokes around that he's doing like these stupid dances, but really it's probably a coping mechanism and a way for him to kind of aid his mental health issues so that he can kind of, you know, not fall off the rails. And then even when we cut the shots of Sophie, you know, there's the one shot where she wakes up because her young child is crying.
Yeah.
It's these subtle facial expressions where she's kind of like, I understand, you know, what a parent has to go through. I understand the struggles that a parent has to go through, the sacrifices and the risks a parent has to take just to, you know, raise a child. And then that just kind of leads me back to what I had previously said about Caleb being probably 20 years old when he had a child. You know, he had to take on so much responsibility at such an immature age, and that probably just ruined him mentally.
Yeah, I think. God,
this film's so like the reason this film's so heartbreaking is it can punch you in the gut from so many different places in your life. So if you're a father, of course, struggling to provide for your kid, this is going to hit you right where it hurts. But even if you're a father that can provide for your kid perfectly fine, I mean, I wish Cam was here for this because I'm sure he can say better than me. But I imagine even when you feel like you can provide everything in the world to your kid, you're always going to be fearful of like, oh, am I doing enough? Am I being a good enough father? Like, I want to give them everything and more. So it's going to hit you right there. Or if you grew up in a broken household and you had issues with your parents and you can see them struggling, and this film will just bring all those emotions back just right out of you. And then same if you're just not even had no issues with your parents and you don't have a kid, but you're just growing old. That's a hard thing. Like, that's one of the most basic things in life that people just don't like consider and talk about. Is just like one of the hardest things. It's just like aging, and just like the fact, like George said, like the happy birthday, and him being like the sister, or like, oh, that's your older brother. No, it's her dad. Like, that's just hard as fuck too. There's so many different ways that this movie can affect you.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought up that last part because I think that's one of the most overlooked aspects of this film. Everyone I got a lot of DMs saying like, how do you relate to this movie? You know, I have a very good relationship with my parents. I obviously do not have a child. So like, how do you relate to this movie? And it's just like, it's not even the idea of going through parenthood or raising a child. It's just like, we're all growing up. You know, moving from college straight into, you know, real life job, it's tough. It's a tough transition. And then you also have to just deal with these struggles of real world. You feel the pressures of needing to, you know, immediately start saving money. You know, how quickly are you going to start raising a family? How quickly are you going to, you know, put a ring on a girl's finger? You know, there's a lot of pressures and struggles that come, you know, throughout your 20s. A lot of people are like, oh, it's your 20s, it's just time to have fun. But there's a lot, and there's a lot that can take a mental toll on someone because of all of these like massive life events that happen between the ages of, you know, 20 and 30.
I think you can just like even just add on general pain in life, just anything. Like, you don't have to kind of relate to this in like you said, the fatherhood way or the broken home way or whatever. It can just be, you know, you're having a rough time. How do you mitigate these feelings is what we see Callum do in the film. He's trying to mitigate his several feelings by doing so. So I think like it is just one of those things where you can, if you're just going through some shit or have done, you're going to relate to this in some way. That's where this apply. There's so many audiences that can take, you know, something from this film. That's what I think is, you know, the best thing about it, really.
Yeah. The line for me that sealed this movie that I think is just like sums up mental health as a whole so brilliantly. And it's one of those things that when a line, like, you know, when movies have obviously like lines of dialogue, you can either look super into it or you can not look into it at all. And people are like, oh, you're just acting like you're writing an English paper. Like they just said a line, like you're reading too deep into it. Maybe that was this, but I don't think so because Charlotte Wells was so brilliant with this. But when he said at the end, when she's like, oh, I don't want to leave, like I wish we could stay. And he's like, we can't live in hotels forever. That line broke me. Yeah, that absolutely broke me. That was like the first point in that movie that like I was just so depressed and like I was so
definitely meant to get that.
Yeah, also, one of the reasons why I'm kind of 50-50 on whether he killed himself or whether he's just going through mental health.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I've decided. And one of the reasons I haven't decided is because one line, Sophie was kind of explaining, you know, no matter where you are, no matter how down you feel, no matter where you are, at what point in your life, all she has to do is look up at the stars and know that her father is staring at the exact same sky. You know, they're in the same world. So for some reason, that line stuck with me because by the end of the movie, it's like, okay, they're estranged. And she's kind of looking back at, or they're possibly estranged, assuming he didn't kill himself. And all Sophie has to do is, you know, she's looking back at these old tapes and she knows in her mind, like, okay, I'm just looking up because I know if I look up, he's going to look up at the exact same thing I'm looking at, which means he is here. He is still around. I don't know. That was just my interpretation of that. That could be completely wrong, but I don't know. I
don't think anything's wrong. I think that's
the point. Exactly. I think this is a film that's just open to so much interpretation.
Like,
yeah.
We've all kind of left with different conclusions. I think that's the best thing about it. Like you can't kind of be wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's like many films. I think that's the best thing about it. But I do kind of understand that. I just think like maybe I'm just looking into it too much, but I can't imagine him not wanting to see his daughter from seeing the way we kind of acted with him, unless obviously Tyler said he did something. But I don't know. Do you know what I mean? From the relationship they had and the kind of connection, I just can't imagine that happening. Where the fact is that he's kind of estranged from his daughter. I just couldn't imagine that in a way. Yeah, I think that she'd want to do something about that, especially if she's, you know, if she's reconciling with her feelings and understanding what he was going through. You'd kind of think that maybe the last thing that she'd want to do would be away from him if he was still available to see. But again, maybe I'm just looking, maybe Tyler's right. Maybe something could have happened within that time that we don't know about. And that's kind of led to. And the best thing is, I don't think we'll ever get an answer to this.
Right, yeah.
Like,
no.
Charlotte Wells probably doesn't have an answer to this. Do you know what I mean? Which is the best thing about it.
I'm sure she probably, in her mind, probably has somewhere she was going. But yeah, another thing kind of plays into that is how when he fell asleep and she was locked out of the room, like he was so apologetic. She's like, oh, it's okay, Dad. And he's like, no, like that's not okay. Should have never happened. So like maybe that plays into like he starts to realize he's like being such a bad father that he's like, I have to get away from her. Like I'm not a good thing for her life. So that could maybe play into that as well. But yeah, that's why it's just such a brilliant directorial debut, that masterclass and everything.
Yeah.
But I think I'm ready to end it there. Is there anyone else?
I just want to say one more thing. That last shot of like Paul, not the last shot. The second to last shot of Paul's Mezcal's character recording while Sophie is kind of waving goodbye
in the airport.
That's where I kind of like figured, okay, this is just going to be a heartbreaking ending. And then obviously it cuts to Paul and his daughter watching the VHS tapes at her house, and it kind of pans over to Paul in a little hallway at the airport, most likely, and he just walks out through that dancing hallway. That is, and I don't think I'm overselling it to say, that is probably one of the best final 10-minute sequences of a film I've ever seen in my entire life. If that scene was not there, I don't think I'd rate this film as highly as I do. I don't think I would have walked out of the theater and hysterically cried as much as I did. It was an absolutely beautiful way to wrap up this massive up for interpretation film.
One thing I did want to ask, now we've got Cam back. Cam, what was your interpretation of the ending?
Dude, I have not thought of. I assume my interpretation of the ending. I assume I killed himself at some point in between, you know, where she's at now and that moment. I don't know if it's right after or when exactly, but that was mine.
Sorry, my assumption. You know how many things we see throughout the holiday where he's seeing these signs. My assumption was the reason she's looking back at the holiday is to see signs of where she didn't spot that, you know, he was in pain, he was struggling, and my conclusion to that was that it was like right after they got back that maybe he committed suicide, and that's why she's looking back to the holiday to see if she should have seen the pain he was going through. Does that make sense? That's kind of
I think Sophie was made to be a very intelligent character, even at the age of 11, because I think she understood to an extent. When she lost those goggles, she was so apologetic about it. She was like, Dad, like, I know how expensive these were. I'm so sorry. She starts like putting his head, like, I think deep down she understood, but I don't think at the age of 11 you could fully understand like the weight that's on this man's shoulders, or even just like the extent of, you know, the mental health issues that he's going through. And yes, I think the ending is very, and with Sophie in the real age, is her, like Seth said, she's trying to figure out exactly how bad it was, like what she did not see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. But Aftersun, go see it in all of our top fives. I imagine it'll stay there for the rest of the year. But that does it for our review. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.